I wasn't sure I was going to review this one. I'm still not entirely sure that it's a best use of my time, given that I probably have way fewer thoughts than the people who seem to be arguing about it. But anyway, The Acolyte, episode 3. This is pretty much entirely a flashback episode, showing us some origin stuff for Osha and May, the twins that were introduced in the two-part premiere. And short version, for me, I think it's doing some interesting stuff. I think it's very easy to forget that the Jedi are a religious order. They're a religious order of knights with political power as well, but it is a religion. Now, it's a space fantasy religion where they get tangible magical powers through the pursuit of what they believe, but it's interesting to be reminded of that fact framed through the coven that we meet and this group of witches who also have some sort of tie into whatever the force is, but they don't view it that way. They actually find it a little bit off, if not offensive or possibly even profane, to view it as a force that one can use, that one can empower oneself with, that one can manipulate. To them, it's something else. But the overall sense I get is that they are still tapping into the same thing, but they think of it differently and they frame it differently. And there is clearly some level of persecution of their order that's come from that. I actually find that all pretty fascinating as far as these things go, because it's really interesting to me that when we as audiences have been conditioned to view the Force the way the Jedi and to a lesser extent the Sith view the Force, because that's the lens through which we've always seen it. But it's really cool to be shown, yeah, that's not the only way that people within this universe see the thing. And just because the Jedi and the Sith clearly are right that there is something out there because they can tap into it, that doesn't mean theirs is the only perspective, and it doesn't mean they're the only ones who can, and it doesn't mean that other people who can tap into it think of it as the Force and view it the same way and make use of it in the same way. That's just cool. That to me is actually a massive expansion of a universe that has honestly, a tendency to feel really small. Despite being galaxy spanning, the fact that all these stories keep coming back to Sith and Jedi, Sith and Jedi, Sith and Jedi over and over and over again, there's almost always, as soon as the Republic falls, no matter how far down the line you go, whether it be in the movies, the comics, or the video games, there's always an empire-like force that they are fighting. Heck, even before the Republic fell, there was something like that. So it just feels very small. It feels oftentimes very insular, especially given that the movies keep centering around the frickin' Skywalkers from start to finish, as if that's the only family in the galaxy that matters. Something like this feels like an actual expansion of the universe and a reminder that, yeah, there's more ways to think and view and be than what you've seen so far. That actually is pretty cool. Does it do a ton with that idea beyond just introducing it? Honestly, I feel like the introduction of that notion is the strongest thing this episode's got going for it. It doesn't do a ton with it, largely because this being a flashback, it's really just setting up Osha's split from May and how Osha ended up with Sol was his name, and May was presumed to be dead. So narratively, it doesn't really have the time to give us a full dive and a real more extensive look at this coven, which I honestly kind of would have liked to have had, but that's not the story they're telling. It's background flavor. It's interesting background flavor, but it doesn't really get to dive too much further than just the ideas it introduces, but I do think those ideas are pretty neat. I think the other thing that is getting at least certain fans up in arms is the notion that Osha and May are immaculately conceived, something in a similar vein to how Anakin might have been. And speaking as someone who does not really care about the integrity of the lore of Star Wars, like, I've grown up on Star Wars. I don't even remember the first time I watched the original trilogy. That's how long I've been watching these movies. But that having been said, like, I never really liked the idea of chosen ones in the first place. So, like, the whole thing with Anakin from the start, I actually never really liked. So the idea that he is not unique in that, I have no problem with. Like, this is not a string that should be pulled too many times. We shouldn't be, like, coming up with dozens of unique and special. Oh, they have no father, force users or empowered people out there. Like, that's going to get real old real quick. That's like in the DC comics when they start introducing dozens upon dozens of Krypton survivors. Like, okay, this is not special. It's kind of cool once you establish that Superman is not literally the only one, but once you get past Supergirl and Zod, then it's like, okay, stop. Diminishing returns from here on out. And I kind of feel the same about this. Like, I don't really care that this is a similar situation to that. Whether it's exactly the same or not, I'm sure people more invested in the lore will have their arguments over that. I don't care. That doesn't mean that you aren't right to care. And that doesn't mean that there's no reason to care. It just means that I personally don't. So if you're about to dump on me all the super specific lore as to why this messes with things or how it's different from Anakin's birth, like, that's great that you know that. That's great that you're invested in that. I don't care. As a viewer, I just don't. I can only watch with the perspective I have, and the perspective I have is I saw that reveal and I was like, oh, okay. That's the perspective of the person you're watching. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm not sure there's too much else. Okay. First of all, I don't believe Sol that the Coven died in the fire. I don't believe him at all. If that is meant to be what actually happened, then they did it wrong, because there were just bodies all over the floor. They weren't engulfed in flames. There was a little bit of debris having fallen on them, so maybe you could argue the ceiling collapsed, but they weren't buried in it. There was just some, like, around them. So they all would have had to have been strategically clocked in the head by the few bits of debris that fell, because it didn't look like an entire ceiling fell on all of them. And so I'm not going to make a prediction of what actually happened, whether it was May did something more targeted than just start a fire, or whether Sol did something, which, why the hell else was he there? I don't necessarily have a prediction, but I absolutely do not believe him that they died because of the fire. And I'm not super invested in this whole May is so devoted into this, idea that they're meant to be together, and what the Coven has brought her up into, that she literally tries to kill her sister. Like, that in general, it's not that it can't work. It's that you do something like that, and I'm going to think of Arcane, and Arcane sets the bar really high. If you're going to beg comparison to Arcane, you're probably going to come up short. And trying to do a young character who is capable of something like that, who's now a dangerous adult, I'm going to think Jinx, and May so far is no Jinx. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But right now I'm just kind of like, okay. I am presuming at this point that it is being pushed forward as there's something wrong with May. And the reason I'm inclined to think that is because if it was just a matter of she has been over indoctrinated, for lack of a better way to put it, by the Coven, and like she just believes in this all of this so much harder, then that doesn't track with how their mother, quote unquote, how their mother treats Osha, because she approaches Osha in a way that to me seems like a very open-minded way, as far as someone very much indoctrinating their children into a religion goes, which is that I hope that you will choose this, but I can't make you, and you need to have the freedom to make your own choice in the end. And if you don't want this, I won't force you. Now, like, is it possible that regardless of them both having been raised in that May just bought into it harder or like has clung to it more as a way of life, and it's where she centers, and that being disrupted is really throwing her off and, well, yes, all of that is decidedly possible. But again, you're dipping into what Arcane did, and Arcane did it better. So it's the kind of thing that, there's a reason that the first 3 episodes of Arcane basically cover what this tries to do in one. Because first 3 episodes of Arcane show us Jinx back when she was Powder, over 3 episodes when she was young, to give us a sense of her, of where she fits, of what her life is, of where the cracks in her existence are, so that on episode 3, they can be broken wide open and we get why she is the way she is when we do the time jump and then come forward. That took 3 episodes to do what this tries to cram in one. There's a reason it needed 3 episodes in Arcane. I know I'm making that comparison a lot, but it's the one that immediately leapt to mind. That having been said, this thing does have a number of interesting ideas, and I'll be curious to see where they go with them. Reminder for me, the Jedi are not sacrosanct, partially because I find them boring. So I don't have a problem with taking the Jedi down a few pegs, because I don't find them that interesting in the first dang place. They can be used well. They frequently are not. So, and for those who have been waiting for me to make note of this, yes, I did notice Abigail Thorne in this. I actually heard her before I spotted her. She does fine with the part she's given. It's not a lot. Good on her for getting the gig. That's fantastic. I'm really happy for her. Reminder, I'm a fan of her work. I don't know her. I've never met her. I think because both she and I have some roles in Jessie Gender's upcoming film Identities, people might assume I've actually met her and know her. I haven't. But I enjoy her work. And she's here and she did solid work. It's not a big part. She's fine in it. Good on you for getting the job. I look forward to see what you're doing in House of the Dragon. So I think that'll wrap it up. The Acolyte, episode 3. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even... that snuck up on me. Crude. Sorry about that. Even if you can't... I should cut that out. I won't. Even if you can't support me that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Jean Foray, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Linda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Renabulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Bluhuvian, Pao Rabajagal, and Mara G. If you'd like to hear your name in the credits, or even just see them, there are rewards on the Patreon, so maybe check those out.